You can sail for weeks across the empty Pacific and see nothing but water, no cities, no harbors, not even a speck of land. But eventually, if you're lucky or unlucky, you might catch sight of a jagged silhouette rising from the waves. A volcanic rock, barely 2 miles wide, draped in green. It looks like paradise. But beneath the palms and steep cliffs lies one of the most disturbing histories on Earth. This island has no airport, no hospital, no police force in the traditional sense. Yet, for centuries, it's been home to a community cut off from the world and from consequences. What began as an escape from justice turned into something darker, a story of murder, alcoholism, betrayal, and generations of pain hidden by isolation, a place where paradise and prison became one and the same. This is Pitcairn Island. Pitcairn Island is as remote as it gets. Tucked deep in the South Pacific, it's more than 3,000 miles from New Zealand, 5,000 from the Americas. No surrounding islands, no nearby trade routes, just a speck of volcanic rock in the vast ocean. But long before European ships arrived, this island wasn't empty. Archaeological evidence shows that Polynesians settled Pitcairn around the 11th century. They came from Mangareva and nearby islands, skilled in navigation and survival. They built terraces, carved tools from the island's rich basalt, and left behind petroglyphs etched into stone. Then, they vanished. By the time Europeans arrived in the 1600s, Pitcairn was abandoned. No one knows exactly why. Drought? Overharvesting? Conflict? The silence of history leaves only questions. That quiet, haunting and total, would later lure a group of desperate fugitives seeking to vanish from the world. In 1789, mutiny broke out aboard HMS Bounty. Led by Fletcher Christian, the rebels seized control of the ship from Captain William Bligh. Their reasons were many: harsh discipline, tropical temptations, dreams of freedom. But one thing was clear: returning to Britain meant certain death. They needed a place to disappear. After months of drifting across the Pacific, hiding in Tahiti and dodging the Royal Navy, Christian found what he was looking for: an uncharted island, invisible to the world. Pitcairn. It was January 1790 when the Bounty dropped anchor for the last time. The mutineers, 9 British men, came with a group of Tahitian women and men. They stripped the ship, salvaged what they could, and then set it ablaze in the bay, ensuring no one could ever leave or find them again. With no chance of rescue or return, they began building a new life. A fragile, hopeful start. But paradise never lasts. Tensions simmered. Resources were scarce. Cultures clashed. And within just a few years, this new Eden would descend into chaos, betrayal, and bloodshed. The early days on Pitcairn seemed promising. Shelter was built, crops were planted, and the island offered what little it could. But under the surface, everything was unraveling. The mutineers had brought with them more than supplies. They brought entitlement, distrust, and a deeply imbalanced social order. 9 European men, a handful of Tahitian men, and over a dozen Polynesian women. Tensions over relationships, labor, and power quickly turned toxic. The Polynesian men were treated as laborers. The women were passed between the mutineers like property. Jealousy grew, resentment festered. Then came the alcohol. Matthew McCoy, one of the mutineers, discovered how to distill alcohol from local plants. And with that, everything accelerated. Drinking fueled tempers. Arguments turned violent. In 1793, the island erupted in bloodshed. 4 of the mutineers were killed by their Tahitian counterparts in an act of retaliation. But the survivors struck back with brutal vengeance, slaughtering the Polynesian men in return. The violence was savage, personal. By the end of the carnage, only 2 mutineers remained alive: Edward Young and John Adams. Most of the original settlers, mutineers and Polynesians alike, were dead. The island had become a graveyard, a failed utopia, floating in isolation. And yet, Somehow, life would continue. By 1800, John Adams stood alone. He was the last surviving mutineer on Pitcairn, left with a community of widows and children born from chaos. The violence had ended, not because of peace, but because there was no one left to fight. In the absence of rivals, Adams transformed. He turned to faith, structure, and education. Using a Bible salvaged from the bounty, he taught the children to read. He led prayers. He created a fragile new order built on discipline and redemption. For 8 years, no ships arrived. The world had forgotten Pitcairn. Then, in 1808, an American vessel stumbled upon the island. Instead of mutineers, they found a peaceful village led by a quiet patriarch. Adams confessed everything, but Britain chose not to prosecute. The island had already paid its price. And Adams, in his strange redemption, had become something rare on Pitcairn, a stabilizing force. After John Adams's death in 1829, the community he built began to fray. Leadership passed through various hands, including Joshua Hill, a self-declared reformer who imposed harsh moral laws and exiled dissenters. Hill was eventually removed, but his reign exposed how fragile the island's peace truly was. By the mid-1800s, overpopulation forced the British to relocate the entire Pitcairn community to Norfolk Island. Some chose to stay behind. Others later returned, hoping to reclaim their isolated paradise. But generations of isolation had consequences. Power remained concentrated among a few families. There was no police force, no courts, only informal rules passed down by tradition. Pitcairn became a British colony in 1838, one of the first places in the world to grant women the right to vote. But beneath the surface, older patterns endured. Alcohol abuse persisted. So did gender inequality. And the scars of the past, violence, coercion, secrecy, were never truly healed. They were inherited. By the late 20th century, Pitcairn's population had dwindled. What once held over 200 people now counted only a few dozen. And then, in 2004, everything unraveled again, this time under the scrutiny of the outside world. In 2004, the world turned its eyes to Pitcairn again, this time not because of its beauty, but because of its darkness. A series of investigations revealed a staggering pattern of sexual abuse, stretching back decades. 7 men, almost a third of the island's adult male population, including the mayor, were charged with dozens of counts of rape and sexual assault. Their victims were often girls as young as 11. The trials exposed something deeper than individual crimes. They revealed a culture where abuse had been normalized, where silence was expected, where isolation had allowed a cycle of violence to go unchallenged. Many on the island defended the accused. Others accused the British government of cultural imperialism. But the evidence was overwhelming and heartbreaking. The small island, once mythologized as a remote paradise, now stood exposed as a place where unchecked power had festered for generations. To carry out justice, the British built a prison on the island, tiny, like everything else on Pitcairn. Judges and lawyers were flown in from New Zealand. The trials shook the island's already fragile foundation. Today, the population hovers below 50. Tourism is rare. Supply ships come just a few times a year. And the shadow of the past looms large over every path, every home. Pitcairn's brutal history wasn't just a thing of the 1700s. It never really ended. Pitcairn's story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. Isolation doesn't always bring peace. Sometimes it creates a vacuum where norms dissolve, where power festers unchecked, where silence becomes survival. On this remote island, violence wasn't a sudden event. It was a slow, corrosive force passed from one generation to the next. Not just in actions, but in expectations, in what people believed was acceptable. Pitcairn shows us how easily humanity's darker impulses can bloom in places with no outside gaze, and how hard it is to undo them once they take root. even in paradise, there are shadows. Pitcairn Island is a paradox, a tropical Eden with a haunted soul. Its story is one of escape and entrapment, of freedom pursued and freedom abused. And though it drifts alone in the Pacific, its lessons reach far beyond its shores. Because isolation doesn't erase human nature, it reveals it. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in more fascinating island stories, make sure to subscribe and like our channel.